All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back and thanks for coming again. Our next guest is Colonel Tod Strickland. He's the current Commandant of the Canadian Army Command and Staff College in Kingston, Ontario, where officers go to take the Army Operations course, a 6-month grueling and highly rewarding ordeal that many of us go through. Colonel Strickland's an infantry officer by trade. He's had a remarkable career with lots of unique opportunities, including a recent posting to Korea. He has more degrees than you can shake a stick at, and is a firm believer in lifelong learning. Sir, thanks for joining us today. Over to you.
Hey, great. Thanks a lot for that. And I don't know whether it's a good thing or not that you phrased it as the current commandant. Maybe you know something I don't. But it's great to be surrounded by friends. I'm hoping you guys can see the presentation that I did up. Got to say thank you to General Fortin and General Selby, two old bosses, to be really honest, for the invitation to come and discuss a topic that is near and dear to me, namely command. This is an occasion I have been relishing, and as I can see it, the slide is up, so that's great. I'm hoping that the translator sounds smarter than I do. But to start things off, I'm going to say that I'm biased when it comes to this topic. I've been an infantry officer for over 30 years, and it's been steadily drummed into me that command is something we should all aspire to. I don't know that I still hold that perspective, but I do know that that is the perspective that has governed my time in the Army. Next slide. So I started and I took the decision to join the Army when I was about 15 years old as an Army cadet on the west coast of British Columbia during a patrol competition on Vancouver Island. I found that I loved being in charge. I loved the sense of agency that command gave me over both what we were doing and how it was to be done. And I didn't necessarily understand that others would control me, though that's an inherent part of the business. So I'm noticing that Mark Grenier can't see the presentation, so we'll just pause here. Can other folks see the presentation?
There we go, sir.
All right, good to go. So at the time that I took the decision to go forth and join the Army as an officer, I had what would be politely described as a romantic and a little naive perspective on what command was. And I don't think I was alone in that. Your typical 15-year-old, your typical 20-year-old has a vision of what it is to command, and whether it's leading a cavalry charge or firing shells at Hill 355 in Korea with 2-horse, or leading one of the last bayonet charges, we have a flawed image of what command is. Now, in the intervening 3 decades or so, I've come to some different opinions, but it has not colored my desire to command or, more importantly, to lead. Next slide. So what have I learned? First, as you heard this morning, command and leadership are not the same thing, although they're intrinsically linked. Anyone can be a leader with or without the allocation of formal authorities. However, to be a commander is to both possess and use those same authorities. But again, really, what is command? And in a nutshell, for me anyway, command is operating in the gray zone almost consistently. Very few situations in my experience have lent themselves to a black or white calculus. You're always operating in the unknown. There's always a piece of the puzzle that you don't know. What is the enemy doing? What are they going to do? What task is coming from higher headquarters? What are the troops below me going to do? I could go on and on. Examples abound, and commanding in an era of COVID-19 has only reinforced this. Command is, as noted by Field Marshal Slim, intensely personal, whether you're a troop commander or the CRA. The methods used by one commander may not work for another. While I was DCO of Task Force Orion back in 2006, I got my experience commanding a battle group in combat. My primary tools were my radio, a notebook, a map, GPS, and all the combat power of a Lab 3, and Steve Gallagher as my battery commander at the time. This worked for me, but it wasn't everyone's experience. And therefore, we have to be careful in transposing our own experiences as constants for everyone in a similar position. Other commanders use different tools for different reasons. Command is also tensions. Sometimes these are singular in nature, the tension between available troops, and the necessary tasks is a good example of this. It's relatively straightforward and can be resolved by common sense, judgment, prioritization, and sequencing. But more often than not, you find yourself at the center of a bunch of conflicting tensions. And the examples here are myriad. Resource availability, the need to inform your people, the need to preserve your operational capacity, long-term sustainability of any initiative you're pursuing, the need to do PT and be seen by your troops, but also to be with your family. And I could go on, but I think you see my point. All of these eat time and demand that you both be organized and efficient, but at the same time that you prioritize the things that must be done over those that can wait. Add to this that you as the commander need to be ahead of everyone else in your thinking on any given subject so that you can orient your team to the ongoing task or mission while you're scanning forward for the emergent one. The system expects a lot of its commanders, and this is only right, but our people have expectations too. And it's here that I think there's value in focusing our discussions. Next slide, please. So when I was approached by Colonel Hatton about doing this talk, my first thought was, what am I going to talk about? What is it to command and what do we expect from our commanders? My second thought was that I needed some assistance in this. And this led me to put a question out on Twitter, seeking input from the wisdom of the masses. And before Jeff Hampton pipes up that that wasn't scientific, he's right. It wasn't scientific at all. But I did get over 100 replies from different people with an opinion on the topic, who could put in as many different expectations as they had for commanders. So I took all the replies, created this word cloud, clearly the Anglo version. My premise being that we, as we prepare for command opportunities, would be well served by focusing on the areas that met the expectations of those that we had to serve. And this was an interesting experience in itself, and you can see the results here. The bigger the word, the more people asked for it. When I looked at this, I saw a number of competencies and different conceptualizations of character. And I found this very interesting and thought that that was what I would share with you. The first item I want to talk about is technical competency, and the observant among you will note that not a single person in my non-scientific crowdsourcing of expectations mentioned this. I don't know why for sure, but my expectation is that it was an assumed skill set, possibly like physical fitness, which was also not mentioned. I don't think you can command an organization without having a baseline competency in whatever the purpose of the organization happens to be. You don't have to be the best at every aspect of the organization's skill sets, but you do have to have enough credibility as a result of your knowledge and skill to inspire respect for yourself and your opinions. This competency also helps build trust in your abilities and serves as an initial foundation for the team to gel around. Incompetent commanders are rarely successful. It also warrants noting that the higher up you go in command within the Army, the harder it's going to actually be to achieve additional technical competencies. The time to do it is now, augmented by informal PME and self-guided professional development over time. Next slide, please. Character, though, is one of the biggest things that people have said they're looking for. And this can be taken to be things like being fair, exhibiting honesty, being transparent, decisive, and consistent, owning problems, being supportive, being loyal, and holding oneself accountable. History is literally full of people who exhibited strength of character both in and out of uniform. Many know of Winston Churchill as a wartime prime minister and one of the architects of the Gallipoli campaign. When that campaign failed, his senses of honor and integrity led him to resign his post as First Sea Lord and take over a battalion on the Western Front during the First World War. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG, was known for her candor, perseverance, and willingness to engage on difficult topics, not for the betterment or enhancement of herself, as much as for the improvement of her society. Canadian Air Commodore Len Burchell, when the senior officer in a Japanese prisoner of war camp, so inspired his men through his sense of duty and responsibility and his fierce loyalty to them that he was credited with keeping more of them alive throughout their captivity than would have otherwise been the case. And this isn't just an officer thing. The example of RSM J.C. Lord of 3 Para JC not standing for Jesus Christ, although that was the rumor. He fantastically illustrates this point. He was the RSM of 3 Para from its creation in the British Army throughout the Second World War until he was captured at Arnhem. He then shaped the perspective of literally friend and foe alike as to the power of discipline and what it was to be a British soldier. After the war, he was the first RSM posted to Sandhurst, a position he held for 15 years. We recognize people like these as possessing amazing character that we need to emulate as commanders. Characters who we are and who we wish to be. As commanders, it is clear that our subordinates have high standards for us to meet, and this is our challenge. Next slide. Many of you will likely recognize the officer in these photos as our former CDS, General Rick Hillier. He's a leader and former commander who is widely recognized for his communication skills. In some ways, he was unique for his ability to connect with almost any audience to which he was speaking. But this versatility in effectively communicating is something to which we can all aspire. It didn't matter who he was talking to. He had the ability to adjust the tone and style of his message to match the audience. Sometimes this could be very physical, like putting a troop in a headlock. It could also be quite funny or humorous. Other times it could be absolutely serious and obviously considered. But looking back at it, I think his biggest secrets to effective communication were that he had a knack for making it personal, and he was utterly sincere in what he was saying. He always seemed to be speaking directly from the heart, directly to his audience. This trait was cultivated and practiced, perhaps like only a storyteller from Newfoundland can. He is also noted for being an accomplished author, and his skills, while substantial, are not things he was born with. These are things he had to learn, practice, and refine. Next slide. This is an area that, frankly, I wish I had learned about when I was 25. Applying the concepts and ideas surrounding emotional intelligence may have well helped me to avoid some of the traps that I fell into as a junior officer. And if you're not familiar with the ideas, there are 4 aspects to emotional intelligence, sometimes referred to as either EI or EQ. These are self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. You can read the textual explanations in the squares, and it's almost striking how much of the text is a complete reflection of what I previously described as the qualities people want in their commanders. Now, not everyone buys into the idea of emotional intelligence, but for me personally, dealing with a unit comprised of Reg Force and reservists, civilians, every gender that is out there, completely multicultural in nature, spread all across Canada and ranging in age from 20 to 59, I can tell you that the principles work pretty well. Being self-aware is the first step. Knowing what buttons set you off and being able to exert self-control in these moments is a really effective tool. And at this point, perhaps one of you is thinking, okay, emotional intelligence, that just sounds like leadership, which brings me to my next point and the next slide. A lot of what we have talked about over the past 10 minutes or so can accurately be described as leadership behaviors. And what I've gleaned over my career is that the thing people really want in their commanders, regardless of how they say it, is leadership. They want to be inspired. They want to be heard. They want decisions they can act on and an example they can follow. They want to trust their boss and know that he or she trusts them back. Similarly, they want to be able to show and receive respect for one another's contribution to the team. The officer in this photo, then Major General Bert Hofmeister, was a reservist who joined the Seaforth Highlanders in 1927. He went to the Staff College course in 1941 as a major, and by 1945, he had successfully commanded divisions in combat in Italy and Northern Europe. He was and is widely recognized as one of the best generals Canada produced during the Second World War. The attribute he is most widely known for is his leadership capability. All of the attributes we want, he personified and exemplified. Dr. Doug Delaney's book, The Soldier's General, is a must-read for anyone who wants to understand both leadership and command in battle. Further, it's a great testament to the need for commanders to grow and develop over time. Next slide. Okay, Now that we have an idea of what command is and what's expected of commanders by those in their charge, how do we get there? And here I'm going to say that the path I'm going to articulate works, but only for some. Not all of us are going to follow the General Hillier, General Vance, General Rouleau model. When we obtain our goals, we do so in a way that works for us. Next slide. But it starts with knowing what you want and then being determined to get there. The basic fact of the matter is that you have to want the job like the 1967 Maple Leafs wanted the Stanley Cup. If you're going to command, you have to want it first. But this will not be enough. Many people have thought or think that they should be in command, and they certainly have the desire to lead in command, but they never made it. And the reasons for this are as varied as the individuals concerned. But like a marriage, it starts with desire and recognizing in yourself that you want to be married to your spouse. The important thing here is that if you recognize that you don't want to command, do everyone a favor, including yourself, and opt out. You'll save yourself pain and aggravation in the long run, and you spare your potential troops from a commander that doesn't want to be there. And to be really honest, at the staff college, I see junior captains coming through all the time that really don't want to command anything. They just want to advance. And we're not doing them a service by putting them on the course. Next slide, please. After desire, the most important part is to start to create the habits through practice that you will need as a commander. You cannot simply act one way while you're awaiting a command opportunity and then act in another when you suddenly get your chance. Command is personal in nature, and you have to shape your habits of person to match what you are expecting to have to do, and the type of commander you will be. Pit crews, drill teams, and the famous naval gun run teams all spend incredible amounts of time practicing to refine their skill sets. We need to approach our craft with that same spirit. We need to learn and practice emotionally intelligent leadership, the seeking of technical mastery, empathy, communication skills, and create the habits of character that we want to see manifested in ourselves as commanders. The time for this is not when you receive warning that command is coming. Indeed, if you do not start creating those habits now, it's unlikely you'll get picked for command at all. Next slide. One habit in particular that you need to focus in on is that of personal study and engagement with your profession. Former CDS General Jacques Dextraz, who started in the Army as a private, used to say that your gray matter did not increase with each promotion or with the loftiness of your rank. And he was absolutely correct. And because you don't know when command is going to come, the shape it is going to take, or what the expectations are going to be, you need to use your time wisely and prepare yourself for the undertaking. How you do this can vary widely, and all of us have our own approach. The bookshelf is an example from my own history and shows what I read to gain an understanding of Korea before and while I was there. But reading is just one way. Twitter and other social media venues offer the opportunity to engage with other professionals internationally. It's amazing the resources that can fall out from engagement within this realm, as the start of the briefing showed. Watching videos are another option, as is wargaming, which is incidentally frequently forgotten. However, the last one is more personal in nature, and that is reflection, deliberate written reflection. It can be incredibly useful to write down how things have gone and how you think you could improve them. We do this at the unit level, doing after action reviews. And a reflection in or on action is the same thing at a personal level. And this has been particularly helpful to me in framing and understanding my experiences better. Now at the staff college, we've realized that we have a role to play in helping you do this. So you're going to hear a lot in the coming weeks and months about Foxhole U, which will serve as a hub for professional study and engagement, particularly for the captains and master bombardiers. I'll take questions about that if you want to discuss it once we get to that point of the discussion. The last way that I'm going to mention that you can help yourself get and be more effective in command is mentorship. Next slide. The bottom line is no one gets anywhere of substance by themselves. We are always helped along and educated by someone or groups of people. And note, having a mentor is one aspect. Being a mentor can also give you additional insights. For those unaware, mentors are like coaches. They look at how you are doing something, or they scan ahead. They're then able to offer advice on how you could do something better or on what is coming up. They need to be extremely candid with you and tell you when things are not going well, as much as when they are going fine. Their best characteristic is the ability to be honest with you when others might not be. And you need to think about this. If you're a commander, there are always those that are going to tell you what they think you want to hear, or who are going to be afraid to give you bad news. You need someone who is going to be able to say that the mark has been missed and that you need to change your ways. Command team partners are frequently good for this, but not always, and they aren't really mentors in the same way. Mentors can also give you a lift up. As a commander, you're going to get discouraged. You are likely going to think that you are the only one that has ever faced a specific problem. This is rarely true. Sometimes someone telling you that they faced something similar 20 years ago and explaining how they got through it can be extremely helpful. For the NCOs among us, there's another element to remember, and specifically it's that you have a role, whether recognized or not, in mentoring and educating your officers. There's a reason we have command teams, and you should not underestimate the value or the necessity of your contributions. Many successful officers would never have gotten the chance to be so without the input and shaping of master bombardiers, sergeants, warrants, and sergeants major. Last point on mentors, you need to have a good relationship with them. Traditionally, they should probably not be in your chain of command because they aren't your boss. They're an advisor, a coach, and an ear. Next slide. So there you have it, my perspective on command. And to be honest, it mirrors that of both Captain James T. Kirk and his occasional adversary, Con. And as Con paraphrased John Milton, the guy on the far left, to explain to Kirk, it's better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. And this is appropriate for command too. The worst day in command of a unit, at least for me, has beaten the best day I've ever had on staff. The sense of personal agency, the ability to influence soldiers, and to direct the achievement of a mission are powerful incentives. It's not too much to describe it as crack cocaine. It's addictive. Last slide, please. Our history, in your history more specifically, is full of great commanders, officers and NCOs who made a difference in shaping the circumstances and future of our country through their actions both on and off the battlefield. I thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you on this important topic. I'll gladly take any questions you might have. And I think it's worth noting that I just talked for about 25 minutes without swearing, and that might be a personal record. So with that, I'll turn it over to the moderator and see if there's any questions.
All right, sir, thanks a lot for that brief. While our team pulls up the questions, I'd like to pursue further your comment about Master Bombardiers coming to the college. When I was a captain on AOC, there was a budding program to bring in warrant officers for some of the exercises, to give them some exposure to the operational planning process, as well as inject some subject matter expertise. Is there a new initiative? Can you delve into that a little bit more with the Master Bombardiers and Master Corporals?
So just to be clear, what we're talking about is Foxhole U, which will be only on a digital realm, but the target audience for that is at the Master Bombardier, Master Corporal, Captain level. So entry level professionals taking in their first command and leadership positions within the force. And what's envisioned is that Foxhole U will be a resource that they can draw from or contribute to and learn more about their profession. The idea of bringing Master Bombardiers, Master Corporals into the Staff College for training specifically isn't a bad one. I think we've got a little bit of work to do on the captains, to be really honest, but there is scope to bring in folks and introduce them to some of the TTPs we're using at the captain level. So it's not something I'll throw out, but it is something I'll give more consideration to.
All right, sir, thanks very much for that. We have a question from Master Bombardier Reese, and it's an audio question. So we'll get the technicians to turn to him for an opportunity to ask a question live.
Sure.
He's not unmuting his microphone at this point, so perhaps we'll move on.
Okay, we'll go to him later, sir. We just while we figure out this technological piece. In the meantime, there's a question from Major Steve Peisch. He says, "I've followed the Staff College attempts, the Canadian Army Command and Staff College attempts to generate PD discussion via Facebook and Twitter, and see that it's gaining traction with respect to members giving their open and often divergent opinions on a topic. How do you think we as leaders can promote better PD dialogue throughout the Army via social media?"
So that's a great question, Steve. Thank you for that. I would say there's a couple of aspects to it. One is we need to participate in the debate ourselves. So we actually don't have a Staff College Twitter feed as much as I've got a Twitter feed that gets piled onto. I think engagement with the medium by us as leaders is a good first step. The second step is we actually need to give a little bit of left and right of arc to those that are participating to ensure that they don't make errors that are going to cost them in the long run. And I think we are getting there, and I think the modern Master Corporal Captain is far more media savvy than we give them credit for. But we do need to make sure they're well aware of it. Our effort at creating Foxhole U specifically was to allow a venue internal to the force that would allow for those types of PD to take place. And what the guns are doing today is a great example of some of the potential that exists out there. There's no reason why we couldn't do this force-wide once a month on any given topic, and people from across the force couldn't participate and tackle specific issues. So lots of potential, but our first step is us getting engaged with the medium and showing that it's okay to have those conversations and to have those difficult discussions. There's always lines that we have to respect, but we can push this forward.
All right, sir, thanks. Our next question comes from Lieutenant Colonel Fred Wolanski. His question is, reflecting upon from the day you joined to this day, what one aspect of command is the most important for young leaders in today's environment?
It goes, Fred, it's really good to see you, man. Although I can't see you, and it's been a very long time. I think it goes back to those basic principles of leadership. Know your troops, promote their welfare. And the only way you know your troops is by getting engaged with them and having discussions with them and sharing a cup of coffee around a track, or just getting out there and being seen by your soldiers and giving them the opportunity to talk with you. That personal aspect of leadership never goes out of style. And that it's probably only second to setting the example, in my opinion. But I think thanks for the lob there. That's a great softball question, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Sir, our next question is from Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Heer, who's the task force commander out in Task Force Unifier in Ukraine. Her question is, with any command comes responsibility, and with that responsibility comes accountability. I would be interested on your thoughts on how you feel as an Army we're doing at holding our leaders accountable, especially as we reach subunit, unit, and higher levels of command.
Sarah, first, congratulations on everything with Unifier. I've seen you taking command over there, and wish you every success. It seems like only yesterday that you were actually at the unit command team course back in February. As an Army and as a military, I think we're actually doing a pretty good job of holding leaders accountable. In some ways, I wish we were more transparent with it and showed our subordinates that their leaders are actually held accountable. Next time we're together, I'll have a beer with you and share the story of my own being held accountable for a mistake I had made. But there's a bit of an urban myth that as you move up the chain, you're not held as accountable. But the fact of the matter, it's just the opposite. The amount of accountability we put on our senior leaders and on down the chain is actually quite amazing. And I think if more people saw that our leaders were being held accountable and being held to task and being corrected when they made mistakes, I think we'd probably be better as an institution. I don't know if that answers your question fully, Sarah, but I'm willing to engage further if you wish.
Thank you, sir. Our next question comes from Chief Warrant Officer Wayne Lundergan, former RSM of 2RCHA. Good to hear from you. His question is, you often use social media to reach out and solicit responses as an avid reader, for example. Do you see this as a necessary tool to message from a command perspective, given the social media usage and climate of our folks today? And could you comment on initiatives that you have discussed relating to professional military education at the college? Kind of a two-part question.
Yeah, thanks there, Chief. It's a very solid question. I don't think the leader of tomorrow will be able to operate without being adept at social media. It is a huge double-edged sword, and I firmly realize that. There's issues of OPSEC and there's issues of PERSEC, but there are so many advantages to being able to communicate with your troops through this means and communicate unfiltered that I can't see it going away. I would be really surprised if the young gunners coming up today who are used to using WhatsApp to communicate within their troop suddenly dropped it when they became master bombardiers or sergeants. I think this is part of our ability to communicate that we have to operate and get used to operating with. There's always a time and place, and we've seen what's going on in Azerbaijan and Armenia, and the risks of deploying with cell phones getting targeted by loitering munitions. We don't want to go down that path. But I think we have to find the middle way that shows how you can use social media as a leadership tool. There's expectations that come with that on leaders. Leaders have to accept that they're going to be reached out to by any and all, including at the lowest level, and sometimes chains of command get bypassed, which is an uncomfortable position to be in as a leader. No one likes to have the VCDS calling you personally when you're a unit commander because one of your troops contacted him directly via social media, but it is a reality. So we just have to accept it and learn how to operate with it. And not learning doesn't improve the situation. We need to shape this the way we want it to be. As far as things at the college and social media, we have crafted an info ops plan right now. And I call it an info ops plan, but basically it's addressing the question of how are we going to talk to our students better and make sure they're getting the message of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And Foxhole U is a big part of that, but we are looking at expanding our social media presence just because it actually leads to broader engagement, and you don't know the opportunities that can fall your way until you engage with it. And whether it's partnership with West Point and the MWI, I can't remember what the M is, but it's Modern Warfare Institute, From the Green Notebook and other websites, the Cove in Australia, all those come about because we engage on social media and we're seen to be doing so. Hope that answers your question there, Chief.
All right, thanks for that, sir. Our next question comes from Master Bombardier Ryan Pittman at the Artillery School, and it relates, I think, to the Foxhole U point that you brought up. But his question is, with talks of the Staff College and development of officers' leadership, are there going to be programs developed like the previous OPME courses that would be available for NCMs to complete?
Great question, Master Bombardier, and I don't have a good answer. Army PME is something we are getting after, so we're going to have to address it, but I'm going to take that away and see what we can do to facilitate that, because I've got 3 chief warrant officers that are looking for work, so I can try and address that a little bit better. Hope that addresses your question. Sorry, it's a crap answer.
All right, sir, thanks for that. Our next question is another former RSM of 2RCHA, Chief Warrant Officer Rodney Gallant, who's posted over to Europe now. His question is whether we should look at adopting emotional intelligence training and testing into the CAF, a professional military education system, for both officers and NCOs? And if so, at what rank level should we introduce this type of training?
So, Chief, thanks for the question. My personal opinion is that emotional intelligence could benefit every master bombardier on up. Like I said in the presentation, I wish I'd learned about it when I was 25. I probably would have been a better junior officer. God knows I would have been a better first husband. There is a lot to it. I learned about emotional intelligence relatively late, less than 5 years ago, at a university course, and started applying it immediately in my own life, and it's incredibly helpful. So I do think there is a value to it, and allowing it to be taught on things like PLQ or on the AOC or ATOC. It's not hard stuff. And to be really honest, it reinforces basic leadership behaviors we expect people to have, but it gives people tools so that they can actually apply them better. And the idea of being self-aware and understanding yourself, you know, it's almost like it's Sun Tzu, for Pete's sake. Know the enemy, know yourself, you'll never lose a battle. Well, we've devoted a lot of energy over the years to knowing our enemy. We've probably devoted far less to knowing ourselves, and sitting down and thinking about, why can my daughter push my buttons like no other woman on the planet, and coming to a realization that I was letting my buttons be pushed. There was value in that. Thankfully, troops haven't figured out which buttons those are. So hope that gets after it there, Chief.
All right, thanks, sir. Our next question comes from my friend, Major Nick Meidiger. And his question is, do you think that we're doing a good job of recognizing and promoting command material, or is career progression and associated command appointment too closely tied to performance in staff position?
There's a lot to unpack there, Nick. It's a great question. So there's going to be a new evaluation system coming out within the CAF that we'll get after that. I think personally that good performance does get recognized, and also potential gets recognized to a point. We weigh second language very heavily. We weigh degrees less so. Operational experience weighs very heavily as well. And those that came up through Afghanistan, vice those that didn't get to go to Afghanistan, as an example, you can see there's an imbalance there in who gets selected to command and who gets selected to move on. My gut feel is we have work to do, but we're more right than wrong. I would say the vast majority of leaders, whether it be at the subunit level on up, have been well selected, and there is an incredible talent pool that is available to the CAF, to the Army, and to the artillery. I mean, before giving this speech, I looked at the participant list and went through, and the folks I know and the folks I've had the privilege to work with, and there is an amazing amount of talent here. The system has to be very stringent in who it gives command to, and that's true at every level. And sadly, not everyone that might be qualified is judged to be ready for command or suitable for the commands that are available. There's work to be done, though, and I know this isn't a particularly good answer either, but this is something we need to look at as leaders. And when we're choosing people, and actually, I'll go back one step. One area that I think we could really improve on is the idea of promoting the outliers. We talk all the time about wanting diversity within our planning teams and within our organizations, and we want to harness those views that are outside the norm. The problem is getting those views outside the norm heard relies on them having some rank and authority, and it doesn't always work that those are the people we get promoted. So were I CDS for a day, maybe I would try and change how we get the voices of the outliers heard more. And as an example, I spent part of my week this week worried about maternity wear. As a infantry officer for 30 years, I have never cared about maternity wear. And suddenly, courtesy of COVID-19, I've got 2 pregnant officers who are showing up, and they are in the latter stages of their pregnancy. And I wasn't aware that CAD-PAT maternity wear was an issue. Wasn't aware that shoes were an issue, or the fact that the contemporary maternity wear ties at the back, which is obviously very hard for a pregnant woman to do up. None of those were issues to me. So came home and I thought about it and went, okay, why haven't I heard about this? Why haven't I had anything voiced to me as a CO or as a commander? And I've been commanding different organizations since 2006. And what it really came down to is the people that get pregnant are generally very junior in the organization, and they don't have necessarily the confidence or the experience or the knowledge that they can share problems with their senior NCOs and with their officers and get things sorted out. The fact that we don't have slip-on shoes for pregnant women to put on and they have to bend over and tie on Oxfords or combat boots, that's a tip of the iceberg issue. And it shows that we need to empower our subordinates to speak better than we're doing. Sorry to go off on a rant there.
Thanks for that, sir. And I just got a live update from my wife, who is a CAF nurse, and she says, tell them we need maternity scrubs. So there you go. It is certainly an issue for our serving women.
And it's hilarious. So hilarious, like strange, not hilarious, funny. I'm not laughing at pregnant women. Obviously, my wife will hear that and I'll get slapped.
All right, sir. Our next question comes from Lieutenant Colonel Derek Prendergast. He says, I did not see humility in the word cloud diagram. Do you think humility is important to leadership?
Derek, I do think humility is important, and I will emphasize that it was a non-scientific, self-selected sample that contributed things. Humility did pop up on occasion when I got the sample, but it was very small as a number. My personal experience is people will work for someone who is humble way more than they will work for someone who is arrogant. And that's a simple lesson into itself. So I agree completely. Humility as a trait in empathy or in emotionally intelligent leadership, leading with empathy, I think it's absolutely required.
All right, sir. Next question comes from somebody you know well, Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Hampton, a former CO of 2 RCHA. His question, sir, is how can we achieve greater efficiencies with officer DP2 level training? It takes approximately 8 to 12 months to undergo AJOSQ, ATOC, and AOC in addition to trades training, which is quite expensive in money and training days. Or is this the cost of the standards we hold so dear?
Jeff, I hope your French course is going well, and I hope you are actually listening to this in French. But the first thing is, do we need to train them to the same level we're training them at now? And for officers at the DP2 level, captains ready to be promoted to major, there's been a lot of evolution in how those officers are trained, whether it starts off with a 1-year course, a 6-month course, 2 6-month courses, or a much shorter course is all open for debate. From my own perspective, there's 2 issues that need to be addressed. The first one is, do we need to give every captain the same DP2 training? Because there are those officers we recognize as captains that are going to go on and be majors, going to go on and be like colonels. And if we're really good in our selection process, we can identify those guys early and get them through AOC, for lack of a better term. But there might be another category of people that we recognize are going to be permanent captains. They're going to serve their 9 years, going back to what the Chief Warrant Officer before me was saying about short-term enlistments. That's not just a junior NCO thing, that's an officer thing too. So why give them the full version of AOC when we could really give them a planning course or a ops course running a talk? I think there's a lot of room for maneuver. I do think operating from first principles is absolutely key. I do think we've got it more right than wrong. I think going back to the Second World War and Bert Hofmeister, the only course he had between the time he was a company commander and the time he was a divisional commander was their version of AOC from back in the day. So it speaks to that experience. And Hofmeister wasn't alone. From my own experience, I took AOC in 2001 as a senior captain. In 2006, I was commanding a battle group. There was no other training that was given to me, and it speaks very highly to the caliber of instruction that I was privileged to receive. So long story short, I think there's room for maneuver in how we make the courses more efficient. I'm not sure that efficiency is what we're looking for. I think we're looking for more effectiveness. But we've just undergone AOC validation. We had 16,000 data points from over 300 different people responding, and we are revamping what AOC looks like. So more to follow. I'll have to ask you to come back to the college and see what we can do. Thanks for the question, Jeff.
Sir, our next question comes from Chief Warrant Officer Bob Beaudry, and it's tied to Chief Warrant Officer Gallant's emotional or EQI question, emotional intelligence. Knowing that the officers who do JCSP conduct a 360 evaluation, his question is whether this process should be done as part of a command team or even at the troop or platoon level.
So the 360-degree evaluation is a great tool. I wouldn't say it's perfect because, frankly, you get to choose who the people are that are responding on you and talking. I have personally found from all levels of command, from the time I was a platoon commander up until now as the commandant of the college, there is incredible value in empowering your people to speak directly to you and tell you what is going wrong with your approach. So as a commander, both here in Kingston, but also in my rifle company and in three Divs Training Center, I wrote out my left and right of arc, as General Leslie used to refer to it, my command approach. So everyone could see how Tod Strickland thought he was going to do things. And at about 6 months in, I would usually sit down with either the complete team or each of the rank bands in the team and ask them for their candid feedback as to whether or not I was walking the walk that I had said I was going to. Calls for previously touched on humility, and you can't get defensive. You can't get upset when someone goes, sir, that's bullshit. That's not what you're doing. You got to fix this. Those moments of candor, if you can build a command climate where troops are actually willing to tell you what is going right and what is going wrong, they're incredibly powerful. And it builds a cohesion and trust inside the team that is far more powerful to me than a 360 assessment. Those assessments are good, and they help all of us as leaders get better. But frank feedback from the team in front of other members of the team, and they can watch you respond when you're getting those challenges, there's value to that. And I'm sure if you talk to any of my RSMs, they would tell you that those private one-on-one conversations where it's me and the RSM, I had a guy named Gary Crosby, an engineer, as my RSM out in Wainwright, sitting in a truck together and driving for 2 hours and discussing things utterly frankly, completely candidly. There's real value to that. And all of it helps you improve as a leader. But keeping the ego in check, that's my personal challenge. So I hope that addresses the question.
Sir, I couldn't agree with you more on that last point. Thanks for an awesome presentation and some candid back and forth with the questions and answers. That's our time for you, sir. Thanks for coming.